we invaded Iraq under the premise that Saddam Hussein had WMDs. He was a dangerous guy, and we had to take him out. But when we got in there, and days passed, and weeks passed, and months passed, we couldn't find any, and that became a concern. And
Yep.
so the press was brutal. They were brutal. They started attacking George Bush and saying, "Hey, we've got our men and women coming home in flag draped coffins, and where's the WMDs? What's the?" And so they were pretty brutal on him. So what that entailed was a great deal of pressure on others within the government to find them.
Yep.
And so that's what happened. And my guy got hooked up. He got arrested in June of 2003. He was thrown in prison and harshly treated for the purposes of finding some traces of WMD to justify why we were there. So that's how he got rolled up the first time. Yeah.
Okay. And then obviously when he was well, not obviously, I would assume when he was let out, probably your top three goal, if not number one goal, would be to not repeat that experience. So I'm going to assume that he probably went underground. How did you find this guy?
Well, it was typical investigative work, find a person who knows a person who knows a person who might be able to get in touch with the guy. It was that type of stuff. And then, keeping track of other scientists who he might hook up with. Because they had a collaboration there. Some of these people worked together and they stayed in contact with each other. And I worked with a program through the State Department called ICSI, the Iraqi Interim Center for Science and Industry. It was a program that our government instituted to try to keep track of all these scientists, because our concern was we had all these people with WMD skills that are now displaced. Because all the places that they worked at, we bombed them out of existence. So they're out there floating around. What are they going to be doing? Could they go to work for the bad guys? Could they, transfer their skills to other people, to bad actors? So we were very concerned about that. So I worked with that program, and that was a good way to keep track of some of these scientists, and that allowed me to make connections to eventually get to Thamer. But my concern was he wouldn't want to talk with us, and I wouldn't blame him, because he had been thrown in prison for 2.5 years, and it was pretty
Yeah.
brutal experience for him, given the pressure to find the WMDs. And then there was a promise by the government when we learned about his skill set. We had actually sent some bureau guys, FBI guys, and polygraph guys to go visit him, and there was some conversation. He agreed to help us, and they would release him. But for some reason, that never transpired, and he was eventually released from prison and sent out into this absolutely horrible environment. Obviously, the war was going on, but there was another war that was taking place, and it was by the jihadis and the insurgents, who had a program to kill or capture every one of the scientists in the country that had skills that could help them. So they wanted these guys to come over to their side to work for them. And the ones that didn't, they just basically assassinated them. And there literally were hundreds of scientists who were killed and assassinated during this period of time. And so he had a target on his back. He was afraid of being kidnapped or being killed. So that's what caused him to go underground and to try to keep ahead of these bad guys. And literally, they were just being killed every single day. They were just walking into their places where they worked and just assassinating them. And the strategy was that they knew they couldn't beat us militarily, so they adopted this policy of killing all of the brain power in the country. So if you don't want a new government to be successful, because they felt that the U.S. government was going to be, I mean, the new Iraqi government was going to be a puppet of the U.S. So one of the ways to prevent the new government from being successful is to kill all the scientists and the brain power. So they went on a mission to do that.
I don't want to give away too much in the book, but clearly you were able to find this individual and he was able to provide what you were talking about, the low level production techniques. How valuable were those insights?
I would say that they were very valuable. A lot of the stuff was very technical, and the information that he told us was placed in a classified report. So I can't talk about
Yep.
those specifics and the details, and most of the people in your audience wouldn't understand the technical part of it. But yeah, it was a valuable.
Let me go ahead and put myself in that category.
Yeah, it was very, very valuable to have his insights into the things that we just didn't know about. And so I think our program was enhanced by having him on our side, and he continued to work for us for a number of years, by the way.
What does his life look like now? Do you have any idea where he's at and what he's up to?
Yeah, I do. I still maintain contact with him because, it's interesting because the assignment that I went on, obviously, the main mission was to find this guy, extract his information, get him into an environment where he would be willing to share this. But we had a lot of pushback against it by our own government, by the way, which is a whole nother aspect. But over time, I just kind of got to know this guy, and I realized that he wasn't my enemy. He was a person like me. He was working for the government, just trying to raise his family and do the right thing, and got caught up in events, beyond his control. And in Saddam's regime, you do what you're told to do, and if you don't, you could wind up in some serious problems. So whatever his assignment was, and he was put in charge of their anthrax programs as well as other programs. But as time went on, I got to know the guy, and I just realized that he wasn't my enemy. And I had some doubts about our existence and why we're there and the purpose of all of that and all of the carnage, and you
Yep.
certainly can speak to that went on.
Same
And
thought.
yeah, and so we actually enemies became friends because when I first started this case, I was an angry dude, man. I mean, I was at 9/11, and standing on the graves of 3,000 people will set you down a dark path of anger and revenge. And I wasn't the only one. All Americans were just devastated by what happened there. And then, of course, we worked 12-hour shifts, and it was just disheartening that we couldn't save anybody. And when we finished working, they put us on a ship for a bit because we just couldn't have any rooms available. But you turn the television on at night and watch, children and parents and brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers just plead for any information on the whereabouts. It was heartbreaking. So I was one angry dude. I wanted revenge, and of course, my time in the military had come and gone, and I was a Secret Service agent. So, but I was angry about it, and then later on, they assigned me to find find a guy that I felt was my enemy because we were fighting Iraq. We were at war with them. Our troops and soldiers are being killed there. So I looked at it, but things changed for me over time as I got to know this guy, and we actually wound up becoming friends.